Most people don't fail because they aim too high. They fail because they aim at yesterday. They wake up, repeat the same routines, carry the same thoughts, and wonder why life refuses to change. The truth is uncomfortable but simple. The life you are living today is a reflection of the person you have been practicing being. Not hoping to be, not wishing to be, practicing being. At some point, all of us reach a moment of quiet realization. A moment when motivation fades, excuses wear thin, and the mirror starts asking better questions than we're ready to answer. You realize that waiting has not worked, blaming has not worked, avoiding has not worked. And suddenly, a different question appears, not when will my life change, but when will I change? This is where rebuilding begins. Not with a dramatic event, but with an honest decision. A decision to stop patching the outside while ignoring the foundation. A decision to stop demanding more from life and start demanding more from yourself. Because improvement does not come from changing circumstances. It comes from changing character, habits, and standards. Tonight is not about becoming someone new. It's about reclaiming who you were always capable of becoming. Personal responsibility is the starting point of all meaningful change because it places the power of transformation back where it belongs, in your own hands. The moment you accept responsibility for your life, you reclaim control over your direction, your results, and your future. Until then, life feels like something that happens to you instead of something you actively shape. Responsibility is not about guilt or self-criticism. It is about ownership. It is the clear understanding that where you are today is largely the result of choices you have made, habits you have practiced, and standards you have accepted. Many people unknowingly delay their growth by outsourcing responsibility. They blame the economy, their upbringing, their boss, their lack of connections, or bad timing. While these factors may influence circumstances, they do not dictate destiny. When you place the cause of your life outside yourself, you also place the solution outside yourself. That is a dangerous trade. The moment you say, "It's not my fault," you also say, "It's not in my control." Personal responsibility restores control by acknowledging that even if you didn't create every problem, you are still responsible for how you respond. Taking responsibility requires honesty. It means looking at your results without emotional defense. If your health is declining, responsibility asks you to examine your habits. If your finances are unstable, it invites you to review your decisions. If your relationships are strained, it urges you to reflect on your communication, patience, and standards. This is not an exercise in self-punishment, but in self-awareness. Growth begins when excuses end. As long as you justify poor outcomes, you preserve the behaviors that created them. Responsibility also demands maturity. It is easy to complain. It is difficult to change. Complaints give temporary relief but no progress. Responsible individuals ask better questions. Instead of asking why life is unfair, they ask what skills they need to develop. Instead of asking who is to blame, they ask what can be improved. This shift in questioning changes everything because questions shape focus, and focus determines action. A responsible mindset trains you to look for leverage rather than sympathy. One of the most powerful aspects of personal responsibility is that it eliminates waiting. Waiting for motivation, permission, confidence, or perfect conditions keeps people stuck for years. Responsibility replaces waiting with action. You don't wait until you feel ready. You act and become ready in the process. You don't wait for confidence. You earn it through repeated effort. You don't wait for clarity. Clarity comes from movement. Responsibility understands that progress creates motivation, not the other way around. Responsibility also raises personal standards. When you fully accept ownership of your life, mediocrity becomes uncomfortable. You begin to expect more from yourself than you demand from others. You stop negotiating with your potential and start honoring it. Standards influence behavior more than goals do. Goals inspire, but standards govern daily conduct. A responsible person does not ask whether they feel like doing what is necessary. They do what is necessary because it aligns with who they have decided to become. This mindset also builds resilience. When challenges arise, responsibility does not collapse into self-pity. It looks for lessons. Failure becomes feedback rather than a verdict. Setbacks become training rather than trauma. When you know that your growth depends on how you respond, obstacles lose their power to define you. Responsibility does not deny difficulty. It refuses to be defeated by it. Personal responsibility also sharpens discipline. Discipline is simply the ability to give yourself instructions and follow them. When responsibility is weak, discipline feels forced. When responsibility is strong, discipline feels logical. You understand that every small action is a vote for the person you are becoming. Skipping effort today is not harmless. It trains inconsistency. Showing up today is not heroic, it trains reliability. Over time, responsibility shapes identity, and identity shapes destiny. Perhaps the most liberating truth about personal responsibility is that it applies equally to success and failure. You don't just own your mistakes, you also own your potential. You are responsible for developing your abilities, expanding your thinking, and refining your character. No one else can do that work for you. Mentors can guide, books can teach, and opportunities can appear, but responsibility determines whether any of those things take root. When responsibility becomes a personal philosophy, life stops being something you endure and starts becoming something you build. Choice by choice, habit by habit, decision by decision, understanding that the greatest investment you will ever make is the one you make in becoming better than you were yesterday. Self-assessment is the bridge between intention and transformation because rebuilding anything without understanding its current condition leads to superficial change. People often desire improvement without first confronting reality, and that disconnect becomes the reason progress stalls. Honest self-assessment is not about judgment or criticism. It is about clarity. It allows you to see where you truly stand instead of where you hope you are or pretend to be. Without this clarity, effort becomes scattered and improvement becomes accidental rather than intentional. Most individuals avoid self-assessment because it requires courage. Looking inward means facing inconsistencies between who you say you want to be and how you actually live. It exposes habits that waste time, attitudes that limit growth, and patterns that quietly sabotage success. Avoidance may feel comfortable in the short term, but comfort delays change. When you refuse to examine yourself, you unknowingly repeat the same behaviors while expecting different results. Self-assessment interrupts this cycle by forcing awareness into areas that have been ignored. True self-assessment demands brutal honesty without emotional distortion. It is easy to exaggerate strengths and downplay weaknesses. It is also easy to be overly harsh and overlook progress. Both extremes distort truth. Effective self-assessment sits in the middle, grounded in facts rather than feelings. It asks simple but revealing questions. How do I actually spend my time? What do my results say about my discipline? What patterns keep showing up in my life? Patterns never lie. They reveal what beliefs you consistently act on, regardless of what you claim to value. One of the most powerful aspects of self-assessment is that it reveals hidden causes. Most people try to change outcomes without identifying the behaviors producing them. They want better health without examining eating and movement habits. They want confidence without evaluating self-talk and preparation. They want better relationships without reflecting on communication and emotional control. Self-assessment traces outcomes back to behaviors and behaviors back to beliefs. Once you identify the belief, you can begin the real work of change. Self-assessment also exposes blind spots. Everyone has them. These are weaknesses you don't notice because they've become normal to you. Feedback from life, from people, and from repeated failures often points directly to these blind spots. A person who resists feedback stays stuck. A person who uses feedback gains insight. Self-assessment transforms feedback from a personal attack into useful data. It teaches you to separate ego from improvement. Growth begins the moment learning becomes more important than protecting pride. Another important role of self-assessment is helping you identify leverage points. Not all weaknesses carry equal weight. Some habits, once improved, create massive ripple effects. Poor time management affects health, learning, and productivity. Negative self-talk affects confidence, relationships, and risk-taking. Inconsistent effort affects every long-term goal. Self-assessment helps you locate the few critical areas that, if improved, would dramatically elevate your life. This prevents wasted energy and scattered focus. Self-assessment also strengthens accountability. When you regularly examine your actions, excuses lose their power. You begin to recognize patterns of avoidance, procrastination, and rationalization. You see how often you negotiate with discipline or lower standards under pressure. This awareness creates internal accountability. You no longer need constant motivation or external pressure because your own honesty becomes the regulator of your behavior. It also plays a vital role in aligning actions with values. Many people claim certain values but live in contradiction to them. Self-assessment highlights this misalignment. It forces you to ask whether your daily actions reflect what you say matters most. When values and behavior are misaligned, frustration grows. When they align, life gains clarity and direction. Rebuilding yourself requires closing this gap, and self-assessment is the tool that reveals it. Another overlooked benefit of self-assessment is that it reveals progress. Growth often feels slow because people only focus on the distance left to travel. When you regularly assess yourself, you can see patterns of improvement, increased awareness, and better decision-making. This reinforces confidence and fuels momentum. Progress that is recognized is more likely to continue. Self-assessment is not a one-time event, but a recurring discipline. People evolve, circumstances change, and new challenges arise. What worked last year may not work now. Continuous self-assessment ensures that growth keeps pace with responsibility. It keeps you adaptable rather than rigid, aware rather than reactive, intentional rather than drifting. When self-assessment becomes a habit, rebuilding yourself stops being guesswork and becomes a deliberate process guided by truth awareness and the willingness to confront yourself honestly in order to become someone stronger, wiser, and more capable than before. Daily disciplines are the invisible structure behind every visible result in life. People often admire success without understanding the quiet consistency that produced it. Rebuilding yourself does not require dramatic change. It requires disciplined repetition of simple actions over time. What you do occasionally may create moments, but what you do daily creates outcomes. Discipline is not about intensity, it is about reliability. When actions become habitual, progress becomes inevitable. Most people overestimate what they can do in a short period and underestimate what they can do over years. This misunderstanding causes frustration and inconsistency. They attempt extreme routines, burn out, and then abandon the process entirely. Daily disciplines avoid this trap by focusing on small, manageable behaviors that can be sustained regardless of mood or circumstances. A few minutes of focused effort every day outperforms sporadic bursts of motivation. Consistency outlasts enthusiasm. Discipline begins with choice. You choose in advance what behaviors align with the person you want to become. This removes daily negotiation. When discipline is weak, each decision feels exhausting because you constantly debate whether or not to act. When discipline is strong, action becomes automatic. You don't ask if you should read, train, reflect, or practice. You simply do it because that is who you are. Identity-driven discipline reduces resistance and increases follow-through. Daily disciplines also compound, just like interest. The effects are often invisible in the beginning, which is why many quit too early. Reading 10 pages today does not feel life-changing. Exercising for 20 minutes may not show immediate results. Practicing a skill briefly may feel insignificant, but compounded over months and years, these small actions create knowledge, health, competence, and confidence. Neglect compounds as well. Skipping effort today trains inconsistency tomorrow. Discipline recognizes that every action, no matter how small, is shaping your future self. One of the greatest benefits of daily disciplines is that they build self-trust. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen your internal credibility. Every time you break one, you weaken it. Confidence is not a personality trait, it is the result of evidence. Discipline produces that evidence. When you show up daily, especially when it is uncomfortable, you begin to trust yourself. This self-trust becomes the foundation for courage, decision-making, and leadership in your own life. Daily disciplines also protect you from emotional instability. Motivation is unreliable because emotions fluctuate. Discipline functions regardless of emotional state. On days when you feel inspired, discipline keeps you grounded. On days when you feel discouraged, discipline keeps you moving. This stability prevents progress from being dependent on mood. You stop asking how you feel and start focusing on what needs to be done. Over time, emotional resilience grows because you are no longer controlled by temporary feelings. Another critical role of daily disciplines is narrowing the gap between intention and execution. Many people know what they should do but fail to do it consistently. Discipline bridges that gap. It translates knowledge into behavior. You can read books, attend seminars, and gather insights, but without disciplined action, nothing changes. Discipline turns information into transformation by forcing application. Applied knowledge compounds, unused knowledge fades. Daily disciplines also create momentum. Action generates energy. The hardest part is often starting, not continuing. Once discipline becomes routine, effort feels lighter. Momentum reduces resistance and increases efficiency. Tasks that once felt heavy become normal. Growth that once felt difficult becomes expected. Discipline creates a rhythm that carries you forward even when progress feels slow. Another overlooked aspect of discipline is that it simplifies life. When you eliminate daily decision fatigue by automating positive behaviors, mental energy becomes available for higher-level thinking. Instead of constantly choosing whether to act, you focus on how to improve. Discipline reduces chaos and increases clarity. It creates structure without rigidity and freedom without disorder. Rebuilding yourself through daily disciplines requires patience. Results arrive quietly before they arrive visibly. The process teaches humility because improvement happens gradually. It teaches responsibility because no one else can do the work for you. It teaches resilience because you learn to act despite resistance. Over time, discipline shapes character, and character determines the level of success you can sustain. Daily disciplines are not restrictive, they are liberating. They free you from regret, inconsistency, and wasted potential. When simple actions are practiced daily with purpose and integrity, they transform not only what you do, but who you become, shaping a life that steadily reflects growth, capability, and intentional self-mastery. Mental conditioning shapes the direction of your life far more than external circumstances ever could. What you repeatedly think, believe, and tell yourself becomes the framework through which you interpret everything that happens to you. Two people can face the same situation and walk away with entirely different outcomes, not because of what occurred, but because of how they processed it. Your inner dialogue quietly programs your behavior, expectations, and tolerance for growth. Without deliberate mental conditioning, the mind defaults to comfort, fear, and limitation. Every action begins as a thought. Before effort appears, a belief authorizes it. If you believe effort will not matter, you hesitate. If you believe failure defines you, you avoid risk. If you believe improvement is possible, you persist. These beliefs are rarely questioned because they develop over years through repetition, environment, and experience. Mental conditioning is the intentional practice of examining and reshaping these beliefs so they serve growth rather than restrict it. It is not about blind positivity. It is about disciplined thinking. One of the most dangerous mental habits is allowing circumstances to dictate mindset. When conditions are good, thinking becomes optimistic. When conditions worsen, thinking collapses. This creates emotional dependence on external factors. Mental conditioning reverses this relationship. It teaches you to bring a stable mindset into unstable situations. Instead of asking what is happening to you, you ask how you are interpreting what is happening. This shift restores control. You cannot control events, but you can control meaning, and meaning drives behavior. Language plays a critical role in mental conditioning. The words you use internally become instructions to the mind. Phrases like, I can't, I'm not good at this, or this always happens to me, reinforce helplessness. Repeated often enough, they feel like facts rather than habits. Conditioning the mind requires conscious replacement of limiting language with accurate, empowering alternatives. Not fantasies, but truthful statements that emphasize effort, learning, and responsibility. The goal is not to deny difficulty, but to frame it in a way that encourages action instead of retreat. Mental conditioning also determines how you respond to failure. An untrained mind treats failure as a verdict on identity. A conditioned mind treats it as information. When failure is personalized, it creates fear. When it is analyzed, it creates progress. Conditioning trains you to separate outcome from self-worth. You learn to critique behavior without attacking identity. This distinction is crucial for long-term growth because improvement demands experimentation, and experimentation guarantees mistakes. Another important aspect of mental conditioning is attention control. The mind becomes what it consistently focuses on. If you focus on obstacles, you feel overwhelmed. If you focus on possibilities, you feel engaged. If you focus on past mistakes, you feel regret. If you focus on lessons, you feel prepared. Conditioning the mind means directing attention intentionally rather than letting it wander toward anxiety, comparison, or distraction. Focus is a skill, and like any skill, it improves with practice. Mental conditioning also influences patience. Many people quit not because they are incapable, but because they expect results too quickly. An unconditioned mind interprets slow progress as failure. A conditioned mind understands the rhythm of growth. It expects resistance, delay, and discomfort. This expectation prevents discouragement. When patience is trained, consistency becomes easier because progress is measured over time rather than moments. Environment strongly affects mental conditioning. What you listen to, watch, read, and discuss feeds the mind daily. Exposure to negativity, cynicism, and distraction weakens mental strength. Exposure to ideas that challenge thinking, expand perspective, and reinforce responsibility strengthens it. Conditioning the mind requires guarding mental inputs just as carefully as physical ones. You become like what you repeatedly consume, whether consciously or unconsciously. Mental conditioning also strengthens decision-making. When the mind is undisciplined, decisions are reactive and emotionally driven. When conditioned decisions become principle-driven, you act based on long-term values rather than short-term comfort. This reduces regret and increases confidence because choices align with identity. A strong mind does not eliminate doubt, but it acts despite it. Rebuilding yourself through mental conditioning is not about changing who you are. It is about removing mental interference that blocks who you could be. The mind can either be a tool or a trap. Conditioning turns it into an ally by training it to support effort, resilience, and responsibility rather than fear, excuse, and hesitation, allowing your internal world to consistently reinforce growth, discipline, and intentional direction. Embracing discomfort is a defining requirement of growth because improvement always demands departure from the familiar. The human mind is wired to seek comfort, stability, and predictability, even when those conditions produce stagnation. Rebuilding yourself means willingly stepping into situations that challenge your habits, beliefs, and identity. Discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It is often the clearest indicator that something is changing. Progress and comfort rarely coexist for long. Most people resist discomfort because they associate it with danger or failure. This association is learned through past experiences where discomfort preceded embarrassment, rejection, or loss. Over time, avoidance becomes a protective strategy. While this protection feels safe, it also limits potential. Growth requires exposing yourself to uncertainty, effort, and vulnerability. Discomfort is the entry fee for learning. Without it, skill remains undeveloped, confidence remains fragile, and capability remains theoretical. Embracing discomfort begins with changing how it is interpreted. Instead of seeing discomfort as a warning, it must be viewed as feedback. The body and mind react when pushed beyond their current limits, but that reaction signals adaptation in progress. Muscles grow through resistance. Skills develop through struggle. Confidence builds through repeated exposure to fear. When discomfort is reframed as evidence of expansion rather than threat, resistance loses its grip. Discomfort also reveals hidden weaknesses. Comfort hides inefficiency because familiar routines require minimal effort. Discomfort exposes gaps in skill, discipline, and knowledge. This exposure is valuable. It provides clarity about what needs improvement. People who avoid discomfort remain unaware of their limitations and therefore never outgrow them. Those who lean into discomfort gain information that accelerates progress. Another critical role of discomfort is strengthening discipline. Discipline is most tested when action conflicts with comfort. It is easy to act when motivation is high and conditions are favorable. It is difficult to act when effort feels heavy and reward feels distant. Choosing action in these moments trains self-mastery. Each time you act despite discomfort, you weaken the mind's tendency to negotiate with effort. Over time, resistance decreases and capability increases. Discomfort also builds emotional resilience. Life is unpredictable and challenges are unavoidable. Those who have trained themselves to tolerate discomfort respond to adversity with composure rather than panic. They do not collapse at the first sign of difficulty because they have practiced functioning under strain. This resilience is not inherited. It is developed through repeated exposure to controlled difficulty. Avoiding discomfort may create temporary relief, but it leaves you unprepared for inevitable hardship. Embracing discomfort also sharpens focus. When something is uncomfortable, the mind becomes alert. This heightened awareness improves learning and adaptation. Comfort dulls attention because nothing demands change. Discomfort demands adjustment. It forces presence. In this way, discomfort becomes a teacher. It shows you where effort is required and where growth is possible. There is also a deep connection between discomfort and confidence. Confidence does not come from ease. It comes from evidence that you can survive difficulty. Each uncomfortable experience you navigate successfully becomes proof of capability. This proof accumulates internally and alters self-perception. You begin to see yourself as someone who can handle challenge rather than avoid it. This shift changes how you approach future opportunities. Discomfort also breaks identity limitations. Many people define themselves by what feels natural or easy. They say they are not disciplined, not confident, not skilled. These identities are often based on comfort zones rather than potential. Discomfort forces identity expansion. When you do what feels unnatural long enough, it becomes familiar. What once felt impossible becomes normal. Growth reshapes identity through repeated exposure to difficulty. It is important to distinguish between productive discomfort and destructive suffering. Productive discomfort stretches capacity with purpose. Destructive suffering drains energy without direction. Embracing discomfort does not mean reckless struggle. It means intentional challenge aligned with growth. The goal is not pain for its own sake, but progress through resistance. Rebuilding yourself requires the courage to repeatedly choose temporary discomfort over long-term regret. Comfort promises ease but delivers stagnation. Discomfort demands effort but delivers strength, clarity, and capability. When you learn to welcome discomfort as a necessary partner in growth, it stops being an obstacle and becomes a signal that you are moving beyond who you were. steadily expanding into who you are capable of becoming through discipline, challenge, and intentional effort. Long-term vision gives rebuilding yourself direction, meaning, and endurance, because without a clear sense of where you are going, effort becomes scattered and fragile. Many people live reactively, making decisions based on immediate pressure, emotion, or convenience. This creates motion without progress. A long-term vision acts as an internal compass that guides choices even when circumstances are unclear. It allows you to evaluate today's actions based on their future consequences rather than their present comfort. A clear vision is not about predicting every detail of the future. It is about defining the kind of person you are committed to becoming. When vision is absent, standards drift. Short-term desires override long-term growth. Discipline weakens because there is no compelling reason to endure discomfort. Vision creates context. It answers the question of why effort matters. When effort is connected to a meaningful future, persistence becomes easier because struggle is no longer random. Long-term vision also stabilizes decision-making. Life presents constant choices, many of which seem small in isolation. Without vision, these choices are made impulsively. With vision, decisions are filtered. You begin to ask whether an action aligns with who you are becoming. This reduces regret because choices are no longer accidental. Vision does not eliminate mistakes, but it reduces confusion. It transforms decision-making from reactive to intentional. Vision also strengthens patience. Growth takes time, and without vision, slow progress feels like failure. Vision reframes time as an ally rather than an enemy. When you know where you are going, you are less likely to abandon the process prematurely. You understand that temporary setbacks do not erase long-term progress. Vision keeps you grounded when results are delayed, reminding you that consistency over time outweighs intensity in moments. Another powerful function of long-term vision is that it creates resilience during adversity. Challenges feel heavier when they appear meaningless. Vision gives hardship a role. Difficulty becomes part of the journey rather than an interruption. Instead of asking why challenges are happening, you begin asking how they are shaping you. This perspective transforms adversity into training. Vision does not prevent struggle, it gives it purpose. Long-term vision also raises personal standards. When you see a clear future version of yourself, settling becomes uncomfortable. You become more selective with habits, relationships, and commitments. Vision sharpens priorities. It reveals what deserves attention and what is a distraction. This clarity reduces wasted energy and increases focus. You stop chasing everything and start investing in what matters most. Vision also fuels consistency. Motivation fluctuates, but vision remains steady. On days when enthusiasm fades, vision carries you forward. It provides a reason to act even when emotion resists. This consistency compounds into progress. Vision is not about feeling inspired every day. It is about staying aligned even when inspiration is absent. Another overlooked benefit of long-term vision is identity alignment. When you consistently imagine and define the person you are becoming, your behavior gradually conforms to that identity. Actions begin to match intention because the mind seeks consistency between self-image and behavior. Vision makes growth personal. You are not just chasing results, you are becoming someone who lives by higher standards. Long-term vision also protects against distraction and comparison. When you lack vision, you are easily pulled into other people's paths, measuring progress by external benchmarks. Vision anchors you to your own journey. It allows you to appreciate others' success without abandoning your direction. Comparison loses its power when purpose is clear. Rebuilding yourself through long-term vision is not about rushing toward a finish line. It is about committing to a lifelong process of refinement. Vision evolves as you grow, but direction remains constant. It reminds you that becoming better is not an event, but a responsibility you carry forward every day, guided by intention, sustained by patience, and reinforced by the understanding that who you become over time matters more than any single achievement. Rebuilding yourself is not about fixing a broken life. It is about strengthening the foundation of a capable one. It begins the moment you accept responsibility, take an honest look inward, and commit to daily disciplines that align with who you want to become. It requires training your mind, embracing discomfort, and holding a long-term vision steady even when progress feels slow. None of these steps are easy, but all of them are necessary. Growth does not reward comfort, and change does not respond to excuses. It responds to action repeated with intention. You do not need to rebuild everything at once. You only need to rebuild consistently. Each disciplined choice, each uncomfortable effort, each moment of clarity compounds into strength over time. The person you become is shaped not by grand promises, but by the standards you live by when no one is watching. When responsibility replaces blame, clarity replaces confusion, and vision replaces distraction, progress becomes unavoidable. As you leave here, remember that your future does not demand perfection, it demands commitment. The work continues tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. Stay patient with the process and relentless with the standard you set for yourself. Good luck on your journey of rebuilding. May you have the courage to change what you can, the discipline to stay consistent, and the belief to keep going even when it's hard. Thank you.